Hey, well, welcome to The Other Six. This is episode 27 of The Other Six podcast. I'm here today with lead pastor Adam. My name is Matt, and I am excited today about our topic. How are you doing today, man?
I'm good. You know what I was thinking about?
What were you thinking
27 episodes in, we may have some people who have started listening to this since we started, and they don't know why we call this The Other Six podcast. So maybe we should tell people why. Because we meet on Sundays,
and it's
then there's the other 6 days of the week.
Right.
And this podcast was just kind of an idea to maybe try to help people grow in their faith as a part of our On Force family. And I've had a few people tell me since we started this that they would rather listen to the podcast than my sermons.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't know. I didn't know if I was supposed to take that as a compliment or not. I actually think it's reflective of different learning styles.
I think so, yeah.
I think it's fun that for some, they get more out of this conversation than the message. So that's kind of cool.
Well, that is cool.
Yeah. But no, I had a great weekend and got to do some more basketball games. We've only got one more weekend left. So
I heard your basketball team is...
I'm so proud of these kids, man. It's just fun watching kids develop. You know, I got my little team, Henry's little team, 8 of them, and all 8 of them scored on Saturday. So that's fun when you see little 4, 5, 6-year-olds making baskets. So, yeah, man, good weekend. What about you? Have any relaxation around?
Yeah, man, I didn't do anything. Last week I had a retreat, and that was fun. Exhausting, but fun. You know, teenagers remind you how much older you are, and
definitely
how much sleep you need and how little they need.
Yeah. Well, good. Sounds like it was relaxing.
Yeah, man, it was good.
And Chad's not here today, so we missed Chad.
He is at Disneyland.
Is he?
Yeah.
Okay. Land or world?
World.
Okay, yeah. Land's
I don't
in California.
I don't know the difference.
You gotta get your terms straight, Matt.
Sorry.
Right. Yeah,
sorry.
Disneyland's in California. Disney World is in Orlando. So big difference.
Big
difference.
Yes. Yeah, he is in Florida, not California.
All right. Have fun, Chad. I'm sure he's listening.
Yeah. He's definitely listening. But yeah, I'm sure he's having a great time. Him down there with Christy. He left the kids. He went by.
Yeah, they're right outside. So hey guys, no, they have family members. So the children okay.
The children okay. Yes. Yeah. So let's dive into the conversation we're having yesterday. You talked about technology with family and interacting with that. So why is technology become an issue right now, and how do we get out of, I guess, this digital mess that we're in?
Yeah, and technology has been awesome in a lot of ways. So it's kind of become an issue for some things, but I was thinking about this morning, knowing we just talked about this in our service, and we're gonna have this podcast conversation. I couldn't remember if it was 2005 or 2006, but it was 2006. So 2006, the Time Person of the Year, Time Magazine. So in 2006, people still bought magazines and they read them.
But I still buy magazines. What are you talking about?
The Time Person of the Year was you. So it was kind of this really fun thing they did where it was a computer screen with like a Mylar cover on the cover of the magazine. So when you looked at the magazine, the Time Person of the Year was you. And then under it, like the subtitle was something like, you've taken the internet to a whole different place. And so how old were you in 2006?
I was 16.
Okay, so you're 16 years old. The idea there was they were recognizing almost like this 2.0 iteration of the internet.
Okay.
So the internet for, the late 80s, all of the 90s, into the 2000s, it was really about content distribution.
Okay.
So the New York Times had to figure out, how do we get our articles online? If you've ever seen the clip of Bryant Gumbel and Katie Couric back in the day, the Today Show in 1994, having a conversation about what is this internet thing? They look like they're from another planet, but as late as 1994, people were still trying to figure out, like, what is the internet? I can remember when I was doing Model United Nations as a high school student, like we would represent different countries. There was a university in our town, and me and my buddies would go to that university so we could get online and research and download and print these articles. And when I went to debate at the tournament, I was the only student that actually had the paperwork for which we were debating about. So that gave me an upper hand. So, 2006, what they're acknowledging is user-created content.
Yeah.
YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, MySpace, all of these things were starting to come about. The first iPhones come out in 2007.
Yeah,
I moved to New York City in 2007. So 2000.
Did you have an iPhone?
No. I'm a late adopter when it comes to technology.
Yeah.
So 2007 to 2011, we're living in New York City. I had an old school iPod.
Okay.
Everybody listens to stuff when they walk around New York. So the last hour every day at my office, don't tell my boss, but what I was doing was downloading things on my iPod that I could listen on my way home from work.
Right.
So like that, I mean, download it. Yeah. It's on that drive. You're listening. Like, no, I didn't know anybody that had an iPhone until about 6 months after they came out. Then, since I'm in New York, you're surrounded by early adopters. And so I started seeing them. I got my first iPhone the month after Jacob was born.
Okay.
So that would have been December of 2011.
Oh, wow.
And which is why I have tons of pictures of Jacob as a baby and like 2 of Sam. So when
difference there.
Sam's born in 2009, I don't have a phone with a camera on it, but Jacob, So I've lived through all of those shifts and changes over the last 10 to 15 years. And, the biggest difference that's happened was, you used to have to seek out technology.
Yeah.
You would have to go find somewhere where you had to hook up a high-speed internet connection with a cable, right?
Yeah. Now it's like if you don't get Wi-Fi.
You had to go find it.
Yeah.
Obviously now it finds us with, all the things. So, all of those changes that started off as convenience and helping us get connected to one another and all of these different things are allowing us to continue to do some things conveniently. They're allowing us to be able to connect. They're allowing us to do something like this.
Right, yeah.
I did a podcast in 2006.
I bet it was completely different than it is now.
There were like 3. And we still didn't get anybody to listen to it. Yeah. But it was me and some buddies, and I was a college pastor, and we were doing some user-created content via podcast for college students.
Yeah.
And no one listened. No one even knew what we were doing, and I didn't know what we were doing. But my buddy thought it was a great idea, and he had like a studio. He was a record. He's made CDs, and so he had all the
recording engineer.
So all the technology has been around for a while. Now, your question was like, how to get it in this mess?
Yeah, like how did it escalate into that?
Right. So it's like anything else. Like if you don't put boundaries in place or safeguards in place or some rules in place or some restrictions in place. And I'm not talking about censorship, all the freedom of speech people are about to come after me. I'm talking about in your own personal lives.
Yeah.
Not the government putting these things in place, us putting them in place.
Yeah,
Eventually, a good thing becomes a God thing, and that's a bad thing. So anything in our lives that takes over our lives becomes bad. And I do think technology used to be something that was a tool. I think now, for a lot of people, it actually just kind of drives the narrative of their life, and that's going to create a lot of challenges. So that's kind of what we're talking about specifically as it pertains to the next generation and the challenges they're going to have, because they don't know any of the things I just described.
No.
All they've ever known is what we now have as reality.
Yeah, they don't know what a iPod Nano is.
Right.
Or anything, of that stuff.
I miss those.
Yeah, I know, man. It was really simple. You press play, and it
there you
goes.
Go. That's it.
That's it. Now you got to go and find. So, kind of shifting gears, talking about the access has been, it's everywhere now. So what is the dangers of the access to this technology, both with kids and, because adults deal with this too. So what are, with media platforms, screen time, and just the general internet, like what are the dangers of that?
Well, I think the dangers are when you expect a child or a teenager to know how to manage this like an adult.
Yeah. Well, adults don't do a good job at it either.
Yeah. So, teenagers and kids, they don't have the emotional maturity to manage the technology that we're giving them. But they think they do, and most parents think they do. So I said this quote. It's from Kara Powell. I like reading her stuff. She's kind of an expert on the next generation. Let's see if I get this right. She said that 14 is the new 21 and 30 is the new 18.
Do what?
So let that sink in for a second. 14 is the new 21 and 30 is the new 18. So what she's saying is by the time you're 14, you're acting like and thinking like what 21-year-olds used to be like.
Okay.
And it used to be that you became an adult when you were 18, you moved out of your parents' house. Well, now it's 30.
Yeah.
So what we've done is we've prolonged this season of adolescence. We let them start acting like adults much earlier, and we let them keep acting like kids much later.
Okay, yeah.
When I graduated from college, nobody called a recent college grad a kid.
Yeah.
I graduated from college and I was working full time the next Monday, right?
Right.
So now we'll refer to people up in their mid-20s as kids, So it's an interesting dynamic. Now, as it pertains to technology, we then think that our kids or our teenagers are going to be able to understand all the ramifications for where this technology could take them that's ultimately going to end up pretty destructive in their lives. We haven't put some things in place as parents. It used to be back in the day, if a kid got picked on a Friday at school, and I'm not talking about like, me picking on you or you picking on me on this podcast. I'm talking about straight bullying, like not good stuff.
Right.
If that kid got bullied on a Friday, he went home for the weekend and it wasn't good and he didn't like it, but he had a couple of days and then he was going to go back to school on Monday. Now, the bullying that takes place, it happens in real time at school, and then it transfers over to cyberbullying. So that kid comes home from school and now it's all over everything online. There's no escape.
Yeah, it's
nonstop. And what happens to this kid and these kids that are bullied and cyberbullied, like it's nonstop. And unfortunately, we know what happens, when that kind of stuff goes on. So there's just so many dangers that kids can run into with technology if the parents aren't the ones leading the way and providing the kind of guidance and coaching that's needed. And like you said, for some adults, that can be challenging as well. So they can't provide what they don't have.
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly right. I'm getting reminders on my phone that like I'm going way too long on screen time, so I can't imagine putting that kind of pressure on a 10-year-old or a 13-year-old whenever they're, starting to use their phones. But kind of switching gears on you a little bit, let's go back to the season where we were on lockdown and we were having to gather online. That was the only way that we could gather, and people were saying that's good. And you said that there was a perception that digital togetherness is not the same as actual togetherness. Can you help me understand that and unpack that?
So if COVID had happened at any of the other times that we were mentioning earlier, we wouldn't have had the technology to do what we did.
Exactly.
So what a blessing that was. And our team did a fantastic job. And then we did the Facebook Live devotion Monday through Friday at 10 a.m.
Which was awesome.
Which... the most nerve-wracking part of my day was the 2 minutes leading up to it because I'm the one who was starting the broadcast. Can you imagine Chad walking me through that over the phone?
Yeah. What do you call it? Mission control? That's
well, so I'm like, do I push that button? Do I push that button? And then once it started, I didn't know, like, am I really on Facebook right now or not?
Let me just tell you, you're not the only one, man.
It was crazy. But it was like, okay, we have this technology. Let's do a Bible study together. I can remember, Matt, this would have been, Lord have mercy, how old was 2003, 2004.
Okay.
I'm a full-time seminary student. Morgan and I are newlyweds, and I'm also serving as a student pastor at a small church. Got my little youth group. And we had like 2 or 3 Wednesday nights in a row where a snowstorm came through. We're living in Virginia, so we canceled church. And we couldn't do our Wednesday night Bible study. So I set up a chat room probably on AOL. Yeah. And invited all of them into. I have no idea. And actually,
mine was Skater Boy.
Whoa. I do know. Let me think. My screen name on AOL was Stinkin' 45 because it was my favorite word and my favorite number. And I just decided I'm Stinkin' 45. So
mine was Skate with an 8.
Yeah?
Skater Boy.
Oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah. Man, I've seen a lot of churches that have those kind of. Anyway. So I invited them into a chat room. And I would type out a question, and I distinctly remember thinking to myself, these kids, most of whom are pretty introverted and never discuss in a Bible study, are typing like crazy in this chat room.
They're typing faster than you can answer.
So it was kind of the first thing I saw with like this online, we're interacting with each other.
Yeah.
But man, if I could only have parlayed that into Facebook, right? But I'm just doing, Bible study chat rooms.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of back in the day, but we did the Facebook Live, we did the devotions, we did all of our services online, and I'm grateful that we were able to do that. I do think that that was for a season. Now, what's been interesting is post that season, it's made everything we do online better. Yeah. I would say that Facebook devotion in many ways is what eventually led us to maybe even trying this.
Yeah.
We're just trying new ideas.
Absolutely,
Our online service is broadcast a lot better than it was previous to COVID, and we're really grateful for that. But When Jesus was ascending into heaven and he looked at his disciples and he's giving them what we kind of call the Great Commission, there's different kind of, Matthew 28 gets recorded some way, Acts chapter 1, go ye therefore, preaching the gospel. We did the be a light, and we used Acts 1:8 as our, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, ends of the earth. When Jesus is giving out these instructions, which we still heed to this day, I mean, this is what we've been called to do as a church. For the life of me, I can't think that what he had in mind was us doing that digitally and not with one another. I just don't think that's what he had in mind. I don't think that he thought for 2,000 years of church history, they'll do this face-to-face, but at some point they'll be able to do this digitally, and that's when the church will finally become what I'm asking it to be. So I think that technology is a tool to help us get the gospel message out. It's a tool to help us connect with people, but it will never replace being with people. It will never replace being with God's people in person, worshiping together. It will never replace being with God's people in some type of smaller setting, whether that's a life group or a Sunday school class or whatever somebody wants to do. So it's a blessing, but the idea that it's the same, it's just not true. And so I think that we've learned both of those things in the last 2 years. We've learned that it's a blessing and a great tool, but we've also learned that it never would take the place of being with one another.
Yeah, as cool as FaceTime can be, it's not the same as being there with that person.
That's right.
Like, I learned that there's some really cool things you can do with FaceTime. Like, you can screen share if you're using the same Wi-Fi, but it's still not the same as sitting in the room and watching something with somebody. So, talking about, that became like a normal thing for us. So, how do we denormalize technology in this generation when that's kind of the only context that they can kind of see it as?
Yeah, so kind of the premise I was working off of yesterday is this new reality where our digital lives and our real lives have converged. And some people don't even know like what that means because they think already
they're the same.
Yeah, they've already kind of become one. So I have my life that I live. Like, I sat in meetings all morning this morning, and I wasn't online. I wasn't doing anything online. And then when I ate my lunch, like, I read some articles. I wanted to catch up on what's happening over in the Ukraine, and I checked Facebook and saw whose birthday it was. Something like that. But like, I kind of live my life, and then I do a few things online. I'll post pictures. I'll comment here and there. I don't have like a fully integrated, but the next generation doesn't make those distinctions as clearly. So one of the ways I think we can do what you're asking is help them make that distinction. Just let them have some times in the day where they don't have their phone on them. Where the iPad is turned off. Remove them from the technology for set periods of time and see how they do. It probably won't go well, probably like a detox. But for a lot of them, their smartphone is almost just like an extension of their hand. So if you're looking for ways to kind of help do that, like, just have some times during the day. Hey, like, when you get home from school, for the first hour you're home from school, like, you're not going to do anything with technology. Well, the problem with that is for a lot of them, their brains have already gotten programmed to get them to a state of calm through technology. So, it's easy for me to say that, like, for the first hour you're home. But for a lot of them, getting online or going to YouTube or like, that is how they decompress. That is how their brain,
Yeah, phones are meant to be addictive.
So that's going to be a challenge. So we can talk about it and have some fun with it. But it's really difficult if you've got kids or teenagers that are already in that pattern to try to begin to move them away from that pattern and do it in a way where you don't try to make them think that the technology is quote unquote bad or wrong. You're just trying to create some distinctions. One of the things that I still seems weird to me. Now, again, let me show my age. Okay, let me show my age. All right.
Okay, all right.
I see this anytime there's a big crowd. I remember watching the Braves win the World Series this year, and they would go to, when the Braves were playing in Houston, there were all these people that would gather in Atlanta outside their stadium, and they're all there. You can see this at a concert or like a big event. When I was growing up, if you were at something like that and you wanted to capture the moment, you had to pull out a camera and you would take a picture of what's going on in front of you. Now at all of these things, everybody pulls out their phone and they take
selfie.
A picture of themselves at that.
Yeah.
That's a shift.
Yeah.
That is a cultural shift that no one said, hey, from now on, instead of taking a picture of what's in front of you, just capture yourself at it, and that's how you'll remember this.
Yeah.
I don't know how to think that way.
Yeah.
Okay. But there's a whole generation of people who do. So I can look at them all wrong. I could look at all of them and go, "You're all wrong. You need a camera like me." Or I could try to go, "All right, they do this differently. What are some things I need to learn? But then what are some things I can offer to maybe help? You know?" And if you've got kids, trust me, if you gave them a smartphone, they don't have one, they'd be more likely to flip it around on themselves and to take a picture of what's in front of them. These are the kind of differences that I'm talking about. And COVID accelerated a lot of these shifts and changes that were happening.
Yes, they did. They really did. You know, like going to a concert now, you're right. Like it's completely different. Like as a musician, I sit there and I'm watching the band and going, this is amazing. And then I look over and like someone younger than me is taking a selfie of themselves. So it is a completely different. I don't understand it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is because we live our lives online. We want to capture in our life what we can share online. And listen, I do that with my kids a lot. For different things, but I'm doing that because I'm celebrating something, and frankly, because a lot of their grandparents and aunts and uncles aren't with them, and it's a great way for them to see what's going on in their life. But a lot of people do that with everything happening in their life.
Yes.
And again, I'm not trying to be the old dude saying get off my lawn. I'm just trying to say it's a difference, and so we have to pay attention and try to learn and speak into that. From a biblical worldview.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, and that you're not being the old guy on the lawn.
I appreciate that.
Maybe I'm on the old guy too on the
lawn.
You
and me one day, we'll be old guys together sitting on the lawn.
Sitting on the lawn together. All right, so you talked about COVID being the great accelerator. Explain that. Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so we talked about that in a number of different ways that accelerated things. So with technology and our kids, when we moved everything about school to virtual learning, that forever made COVID the great accelerator.
Okay.
So prior to that date, technology was something that they would use at school. Technology was something that they would use at home.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, technology became the way they did school at home.
Yeah.
That accelerated things.
Yeah.
Okay. And, when that first happened, it was like, okay, is this going to be for a week or two?
Yeah.
How long is this going to go on?
Right.
And you got to think about this, now, these teachers didn't really get much of a heads up. No. And they're trying to figure out how to do that. The kids are trying to figure out how to do that. The parents are trying to figure out how to do that. And I'm not trying to get all high and mighty, but I've been an online professor for 9 years. So online education is a whole different deal. So, I've been through hundreds of hours of training on how to be an online teacher and professor at the college level for college students to help keep them engaged, to help improve the learning experience, to foster community, to foster engagement. And it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's very challenging. So for all of this to just kind of be like, oh, that'll work great. Man, it just didn't.
Yeah.
That wasn't fair to anybody. And what happened then, though, is it forever normalized that to where, now, I mean, are we ever going to have classic snow days again? Like if it ever did snow here,
I thought about that.
Would they let the kids have a snow day? I mean, will it scroll across the bottom of the TV screen that their school's been canceled? Or is it just going to be, all right, everybody log on at 9 a.m.?
The movie Snow Day is irrelevant now.
Yeah, so, okay, but the point I'm trying to make is when something happens that's that global of a shift, what it did was it accelerated that timeline for them to normalize technology. Because when you're a kid, school is your job. School is your life. That's what you do with your time. And if now that's happening through technology, well, it's normalized it. And again, I've been involved in online education for almost a decade, so I'm not opposed to online education. But here's the difference. The people who, previous to COVID, were engaged in online education were engaged in it because they chose it.
Yeah.
not because they had to.
That was,
So when it chooses you, like what happens for, the families that don't have high-speed internet connection? Some of the people that need the help with school the most, who are in challenging situations at home, that whole approach left them behind. So, that accelerated things in a way that's going to be challenging to kind of, regroup. The class of 2020, like none of them got to go to graduations. We recently hired someone who graduated from college in 2020, and I'm just still thinking how bizarre would that have been? So it accelerated a lot of things, and we get into the third school year. I mean, I remember this school year starting in a week before school started. We just randomly got this email: the kids are going to be required to wear masks. And if you had told me at the end of last school year that would be happening at the start of this school year, I would have said, well, there's no way that'll happen. But yet so, the kids have continued to have to do all of these things that the adults are making them do. And, it's affected the learning experience. It's affected being able to make friends. It's affected their emotional state at school. And so, all of those things have been accelerated. And here's where it gets really hard. Those problems then get dropped in the door when they come home, so it's now mom and dad are having to manage that with the kids. And so, I mean, I'm not trying to blame, because the saying hindsight's 2020 is, probably going to always take on a different meaning now. But if we're not at least describing some of the challenges, it's going to be really hard to respond to them appropriately.
Right.
So it accelerated a lot of those challenges.
Okay, well, explain. So you talked about yesterday a couple options of responding to it as COVID is the great accelerator. You talked about isolation, saturation, and interpretation. Explain a little bit in detail about that.
I think isolation would be fantastic. Where can I move? Or I can't get internet service, and I'm kind of isolated from everybody.
Mountaintop, man.
Maybe some mountains out west. Let's go just settle in. I see the appeal of that.
Absolutely.
I don't think ultimately that's what we've been called to do. I think that Jesus has us here to be a light. I'm not saying you don't need to isolate yourself every now and then. Go on a vacation where there's no technology. That's fine.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So all of that, but it's probably not the approach that's very realistic. The saturation, unfortunately, is what I see a lot, is parents that just don't think through the ramifications of giving their kids the technology because their friends' kids have the technology and all those kind of things. And I don't mind sharing this on this podcast because I think this is a family discussion. We're doing this for our Vaughn Forest Church family. But I'd appreciate it if you don't track down my 12-year-old on a Sunday and bring this up with him. Because, when I tell stories about my kids, I don't need them being told that I'm telling stories about my kids.
They're like, Dad, quit telling stories about me, man.
Yeah, but, I have a 12-year-old son who'll be 13 in August. He does not have a smartphone. He's probably the only kid in his class at school who doesn't have one.
Yeah.
So that makes him feel weird, probably. He's too sweet to tell me that, but I'm sure it does.
Yeah.
But we had a long conversation about it after the message because he sits in there, he takes notes, and we discuss my sermons, which is actually pretty rewarding to get to do that with your son.
That's pretty cool.
So we had a long conversation about it. It was a long car ride that we had together, about 30 minutes. And I will tell everyone listening to this podcast what I told him. So you get a little insight into how I parent. Right or wrong, I'm putting myself out there. I'm going to be a little vulnerable. I said, Sam, I need you to understand that handing you a smartphone to me feels the exact same as if I handed you a loaded handgun. And I wouldn't give you a loaded handgun unless I had trained you properly on how to, handle guns. I'm not anti-guns, but I wouldn't hand him a loaded handgun if no one ever taught him how to do it, how to use it, all these things, gun safety, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I said, there will be a point where I'll get you a smartphone, but it won't be until there's been a lot of training so that when that's in your hand, you understand the danger. Just like you would understand the danger of a loaded handgun. You also understand the use of it, the good things about it.
Yeah.
But I just said it won't be something where, someone else got one? Okay, let's go get you one.
Yeah,
you're turning 13 in August? It's probably time to get you one for your birthday. I said it'll be that thought out and that meticulous. And Sam is pretty mature for his age. And he just said, Dad, I really could see I could see why you're taking that approach.
Yeah, that's really mature of him to say that.
So he may not necessarily like the fact that he doesn't have a smartphone, but he's already had encounters with kids who are showing him things with their smartphones that are inappropriate.
Right.
And we've had all those conversations.
Yeah.
I have those conversations with my boys when they turn 10. Mm-hmm. I've done that with both Sam and Jacob. Henry is 6. I doubt I'll be able to wait till he's 10. Mm-hmm. It'll probably be more like 8 with him.
Yeah.
Why? Because COVID's the great accelerator. The things that Henry will deal with at 8, Sam and Jacob didn't deal with at 8. Yeah. So, I have to be ahead. I got to be ahead of the game when it comes to these things. So, the saturation thing to me is something to really challenge parents on. Like, if you've gone all in with this technology thing with your kids and just let them blend in with the culture, I assure you there are some things going on right now with that technology that you don't know about.
Yeah.
And it's time to get all up in their business, like I said yesterday, for their own protection and for their own good.
Right.
The third option is the interpretation. We're the coaches. We interpret, hey, Sam, did somebody showing you something on their phone they shouldn't show you? Jacob, did somebody show you something they're not supposed to show you? Yeah. Where did it happen? Yeah. Okay. Who was it? Okay. Well, let's call their, no. All right. How did you react? How did you respond? How did that make you feel? What do you, like, I'm going to help them interpret this. Right. Okay. Out in the open. Like, we're going to talk about these things out in the open. There's not going to be shame associated with these conversations because they didn't do anything wrong. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I remember when we were living in New York, walking around, oh my gosh, just the walk to get to the place where we would hold our worship services, I would see 10 things that would make most people blush, And it's like every day in New York. And I remember thinking to myself, like, man, Sam and I are going to have some really interesting conversations as he gets older because he's going to be like, what was that, Daddy? And I'm going to have to tell him, And then we moved. Yeah. And I remember when we moved thinking, don't fall into the trap that now because you're going to live in a suburban cul-de-sac that you don't still need to have those conversations.
Yeah, the approach is the same.
Yeah, so, when we drive past, certain things or, they bring up things to the phone, we have these conversations. We talk about these things in appropriate ways out in the open so there's no shame associated with it and so that they know that I have taken on the role to try to help guide them through this. Do I always get that right? No. I mean, if I ran into something that I wasn't sure how to handle, are there other men I could reach out to try to get some advice from? Yeah. But I've committed to like doing things in the light.
Yeah.
Raising so that we're going to have a lot of discussions. And so, we talk about the things they're encountering, and then we talk about how we can, try to counter that. And then we have some safeguards in place to try to keep our kids from, having to experience that kind of stuff. School buses are not going well these days.
Yeah.
So not every parent has the option of picking their kids up from school. But I'm very hesitant to put my kid on a school bus because I know what's happening on those school buses, and it's totally unsupervised, and it's all these kids with smartphones, and it's just not good. So, we've had to have a lot of conversations about that.
Yeah.
So I would just get what's going on in your kids' lives on your agenda. Mm-hmm. And get them to a place where they can openly talk about the things that are going on in their lives. Because if you don't help them process that and coach them through that, they will find someone else who will.
That will.
It'll probably be someone online, and it won't be good.
Yeah.
So, that's what parenting looks like today.
Yeah.
I wish parenting looked more like it looked 20 or 30 years ago. But it doesn't. Yeah. So we've got to parent the way that we have to parent today, not 10 years ago, not 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Today. And that's what it looks like today.
Yeah. Well, so for me, Sam sounds very mature on how he handled, that conversation. But maybe for some of the other kids and parents when they're having these conversations, how can you help them better understand like the spiritual benefits and practical benefits of choosing to do the opposite of, what everything else the majority is telling them to do?
Leverage the technology for their spiritual growth. Mm-hmm. So the YouTube Bible app, not YouTube, YouVersion. YouTube is the,
I knew what you meant.
Dude Perfect. That's what I watch on YouTube.
Yeah.
The YouVersion Bible app. Uh-huh. The Right Now Media app.
Yeah.
get some apps going in your digital life and in their digital life. Like go through a Bible reading plan together using the YouVersion Bible app.
Yeah.
Watch a video series on the Right Now Media app. And if you don't have a Right Now Media account, like email one of us and we'll send you the link. Yeah. It's free. It's one of the things we provide, for our church family. It's basically like Netflix for Christians. Like there's all these different Bible studies and kids studies, and every season of my kids' lives, we have accessed different resources from Right Now Media. If you've got little kids, it's hard to beat the little monster trucks that talk about.
What?
Yeah, it's awesome, man. What's his name? Meteor and his monster truck friends. There's all these great lessons.
I'm gonna go find that.
3, 2, 1 penguins, man. 3, 2, 1 penguins, man. That's my role. I could quote you 3, 2, 1 penguins here all day from when my boys were little. But as they've gotten older, like we've explored other things in Right Now Media that we watch together. I recently watched the Bible series that came out on the History Channel in 2013. You can purchase that. I purchased it through YouTube. And we sat down in the evenings after we put Henry to bed because he's 6 and he's a little too young. But I watched it with Sam and Jacob, and we had lots of good discussions about it. So
I heard that was a really good.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I have not seen yet The Chosen, the one that's come out about the disciples.
Okay, yeah.
I've heard a lot of great things about it from some friends. So at some point I'll watch that with the boys, and we'll have some discussions about it. So what you want to do is try to point them in the direction of really positive things from technology. Toby Mac, during the shutdown, put out a whole lot of really great videos of he and his band playing their songs together with kind of like the Zoom kind of look and feel.
Diversity.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
They are awesome.
So my boys we'll still pull those up from time to time and watch those. So what you're trying to do is help them see all of the good that can also come from technology. We watch, you'll appreciate this as a worship leader. I'll pull up a lot of live worship music, like it's a band and they're doing a worship set in an arena or at another church, and you can watch that and they see like thousands of people like worshiping Jesus and they're like, wow, that's awesome. And, I love that song. And then we'll talk about that. And so you're just trying to like be on the defensive side. Okay, what are some boundaries? What are some rules? What are some restrictions? But then get on the offensive side as well. How can I proactively engage technology from a positive perspective? I am a big fan of Dude Perfect. So Dude Perfect, they're on YouTube. If you haven't ever searched Dude Perfect on YouTube, do yourself a favor and search Dude Perfect on YouTube. I'm not being paid by Dude Perfect to say this.
Like and subscribe.
But they're 5 guys who love Jesus, love their wives, love their kids. Yeah. And they produce content that's fantastic. So, find the things out there that are really good and reinforcing what you're trying. We have these guys, it's called the So-and-So Show. At the So-and-So Show. Yeah, ask if your kids are involved in our Vaughn Forest Kids Ministry, ask them about the So-and-So Show, and then have a seat because they're going to talk your ears off. A lot of kids riding home from church on Sundays. What'd you learn about today? Jesus, it's like, how can you say it was wrong? They didn't, Jesus' name, they learned something from the Old Testament, but so kids can't retain anything they learn from church. Ask your kids about the So-and-So Show. They'll tell you everything. My boys talk about the So-and-So Show all the time. Well, why? Well, it's these 2 guys that are creating a format to deliver content in a way that engages their hearts, souls, minds. It's funny. It's memorable. The kids are learning God's word through a medium that matches the way that they learn. And so we bring that into our children's ministry environments, because that's how kids learn today.
That's
and
fun.
They're the test.
Yeah.
Not is that how I want to learn, not is that how I want to teach, but how can they retain things? Yeah. And so the So-and-So Show, again, it's just one of the ways. So we try to so at home, just try to bring in as many things as possible to help reinforce these things.
Yeah, that's fun. The So-and-So Show.
The So-and-So Show, yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to go, I don't have a kid, so I don't know how I'm going to watch.
Just find one and run around here on Sunday. They'll tell you all about it, Matt.
The So-and-So Show. Yeah. All right. So this is a little bit of a different topic, but the submitting to authority, that is a hot topic item, and I think it's because the younger generation is kind of jaded by authority. So what does it mean to biblically submit to authority.
Yeah, don't make it big, make it small. Like, who are the kids' authority figures in your life right now, in their lives right now, and teach them to be respectful to those authority figures. My kids, if they say something bad about, somebody at their school, and it's never their teachers, it's like some, a custodian or a librarian, or it's like, you don't even know them. Like,
you had like 5 seconds of a conversation.
No, they're the adult. You're not. So you have, so you're trying to just build in a healthy level of respect for authority. If they play sports with their coach, with their teachers, here at church on Sundays, who's the adult in the room? Do they listen? Do they follow instruction? When an adult, an authority points out something about your kid that needs to shift, do you get defensive, or do you say, okay, this is an opportunity for me as a parent, okay? Don't get, parenting is more about our kids' first names than our last names. So many times as parents, we think our parenting is reflective of our reputation. And we're so prideful that we think if our kids do something, that's going to reflect poorly on me. Well, heaven help us if we're running our parenting decisions through the filters of us, okay? We parent for their first name, not our last name. So somebody points out, hey, having some issues here, being disrespectful, not following instruction. Okay, I appreciate you letting me know that. Now, as the parent, I'm going to try to help guide them towards a healthy respect or authority. And here's the rule in our home. You always do what the adult says unless the adult tells you to do something different than what Jesus says. And my kids have yet to run into that scenario. And there's a good chance growing up in Pike Road, Alabama, they won't run into that scenario, okay? But if someone ever told one of my kids, renounce Jesus Christ as your savior, like, they're probably going to say, I'm not doing that. So, yes, I understand there is a line where you have to, disrespect the authority if the authority is telling us to do something counter to what God's word has done. That's probably not going to happen. That's probably not going to happen. The biggest reason our kids need to learn authority now is because it will benefit them later. Most people in their 20s just do terribly at work because they were raised in a culture that made their opinion the most important opinion. And they go to work and they still think that. They think that way. They think that their opinion is the most important opinion. And at work, I promise you, it's not the most important opinion. But they don't know how to function in that world. So they bounce around from job to job to job. And the boss is always the problem. The supervisor is always the problem. That person's a dictator. Well, all they did was ask you when you were coming back for lunch. Like that's not really a sign of a dictator,
Hey, just to let you know, like 2 hours for lunch.
2 hour lunch breaks, a bit much. Much. I remember, and again, this is, I've been working now for over 20 years, but I can remember early on, full-time job, talking to my dad, and like I said something one time about an idea that I had, and he just said, well, you do know that your boss isn't paying you for your ideas.
That's a good dad right there, man.
What do you mean? He goes, don't take that the wrong way. He goes, what your boss needs you to do is help them accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. And if while you're doing that, you see some better ways that can help them, that's really helpful. But don't try to always get your idea. He goes, and I just remember thinking what helpful guidance and advice that my dad gave me. And I think that when it comes to authority, if you want your kids to shine, just teach them how to be respectful to authority. Because listen, as someone who's around a lot of kids, there's a lot of kids that are very disrespectful towards authority. And so the ones that are respectful, man, they stick out in the right way because a lot of parents just aren't teaching their kids these kind of things.
So how do we live and help others live in a submissive to authority, to be submissive to authority? How do we do that?
Well, I mean, your own holiness matters. I mean, are we submitting ourselves to what God's word says? That's a very unpopular thing to do in our culture. Are we submitting ourselves to the Holy Spirit's conviction in our lives? I think that the desire that we have to submit our lives to the Lord's leading and the follow-through that we show and demonstrate in doing that has a direct correlation to whether or not our kids will submit to authority, So the authority in our lives is, the Lord, God's word. But then I would also say, are there some people in your lives that you have voluntarily chosen to let be your authority? We've got a group of men in our church. I know they meet on Tuesday nights. And these guys, voluntarily choose to let one another be the authority in one another's life.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
That's
so
really...
they encourage one another, but they can also admonish one another when needed. And so I think that we can model that for our kids through the relationships we have, and giving people permission to speak into our lives and point out things that just need to be pointed out.
Right.
And when they get pointed out, not defending ourselves, but owning it. So all of those things matter in a supernatural way, and they matter in our own character development. And our kids, again, more is caught than is taught. They're going to pick up on that.
Yeah. Well, you talked about, building up our character and stuff like that. Let's talk about routines and structure.
Yeah.
Can you give me some examples of a good practical, routine and structure?
I think everybody listening to this podcast live would get better if they would put a little bit more structure into their life.
Yeah.
Okay. So the problem with adults is a lot of times we don't have someone telling us that we need to have structure, so we don't self-impose structure. But structure is what is given to you through all of your developmental years, whether you're homeschool, Christian school, private school, public school, somebody's structuring your day for you, okay?
Someone's going to do it for you.
When you get to work, usually it's structured, even if you're working from home, there's some structure to it. So do you put structure in your life, or is your life just kind of like a fly by the seat of your pants, okay? And even if your personality is a little bit more spontaneous, you still need to have some structure.
Yeah.
We already have structure. Let me tell you what our structure is called. 3 meals a day and we sleep at night. We're all kind of following that structure, okay? So
basic structure right
Here's
there.
a really good structure. Just eat at meal times.
Yeah.
Don't eat at other times. You'll probably be healthier. Here's a good structure. Only sleep when it's time to sleep. Don't sleep in the middle of the day when you're supposed to be at work. Sleep at night. So I'm trying to be kind of funny here, but we already have some structure in our life.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the vanilla structure.
Maybe the structure is I need to start waking up an hour earlier every day than I wake up.
Yeah.
I could probably get more done if I woke up an hour earlier. Someone says, I could never do that. Well, I hate to break it to you, but in 2 weeks, you're going to have to do it because the time's going to change again. All right. So,
man.
Yeah. So
yeah.
It's like that structure forces us to do this. Okay.
Who came up with that?
So can you create some structure in your life that forces you to do things? So let me give you like a helpful place to start.
Mm-hmm.
Think of your day as 90-minute chunks of time with 30 minutes in between each of those chunks of time.
Yeah. Okay.
And then could you structure your day accordingly? So I got car line, I got this, I got that, I got lunch, I got breakfast, I got work, I'm going to look at my day and I'm going to look at it through the lens of 90-minute chunks of time with 30 minutes in between. And the reason why is your brain, after about 90 minutes, is going to lose focus.
Right.
Most people have never sat down and focused for 90 straight minutes. Okay? But you can do it. And I bet you'd be really productive if you did one thing for 90 minutes. Like if you cleaned your house for 90 minutes without looking at your phone. If you did laundry for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
If you tried to read a book for 90 minutes. If you tried to get your taxes done for 90 minutes. If you get the point.
Yeah, okay? I get it.
And then you got 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Chill time.
Yeah.
Run around the yard, get on Facebook,
so
text your friends.
It's so crazy that you're mentioning that. Like I do like a newsletter for the worship team, but part of it I put on there is like, hey, here's a better way to structure your time. And there's these study break sessions, and they'll do a 50 to 10,
right?
25-5. And they structure it throughout the day. It's like, play this at work. I promise you'll probably be better.
So maybe I'm a little ambitious with my 90 minutes and 30.
Well,
maybe it's 45 and 15. That might be a good place to start. So
but you can structure it like that. There are things that
and I'm gonna say something that's really weird because I'm nerding out because like I love this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you would try this, so my Monday through Thursday is this. And you know this. I mean, you work with me.
You kind of
every minute of my day is structured.
Yeah.
And if it gets thrown off a little bit,
right?
I plan, structure every. So what's weird about our brains is your brain begins to recognize the structure. So I'm telling you, like this is going to sound weird to somebody who's listening right now, but my brain knows the time of the week that it's time to write a sermon.
Yeah.
It just knows.
Yeah.
Like I sit down at the same place, I have the same view, it's the same time, and my brain's like, let's go. And like we start writing.
Yeah.
My brain knows the same time every week that I meet with you.
Yeah.
Because that's a set time. It doesn't change. And so what happens is like when we record this podcast,
right?
Like the hour leading up to this podcast, I do the same thing every week.
Yes.
Then we do this podcast, and then we go to the same meeting after this podcast.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, it's a very boring existence we lead. But the idea is we actually function better in the structure.
Way better.
If we showed up here today and went, what are we going to do today?
What are we going to talk about today?
What on earth, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just simply saying, like, try that at home.
Yeah.
Build some structure for your kids. Hey, the first 30 minutes when my kids get home from school, here's what we do. Yeah. The next 30 minutes, here's what we do. The next 30 minutes, here's what we do. The next, like, give that to them and lead them through it. And I think it'll be helpful and have some fun with it. You know, try some different things. If you try a structure and it doesn't work, try something different. But everybody could use a little more structure in their lives. I think it would help all of us. So, you know, find those areas. And I mean, if you can't figure it out, there's lots of resources. Maybe we'll do a whole podcast, Matthew,
we need to.
On structure and systems. And our moms will listen and no one else.
Listen. All right. Yeah, man. Structure is important and you can have some fun with it. So, you know, the next generation, I can kind of see that they're really passionate about making a difference in today's world. How do we help them see that God wants them to use that to point people to Jesus? How do we help them see that?
Expose them to some examples that are already happening. I mentioned Dude Perfect earlier. We talk about those guys. 50 million subscribers on YouTube.
Yeah.
And they're telling people about Jesus, but they're doing it in a way that it's relevant to where people's lives are. I think the story of Tom's shoes is fantastic and how all of that got started. You know, one guy who had this idea and you know, so what you want to try to help them see is that it's never been easier for one person to make a great impact.
Yeah.
You don't have to put the pressure of changing the world on their shoulders, but like they can actually be someone that God uses. And the technology that we have today makes it easier for that to happen. So what we want to make sure that our kids understand is that this technology could actually be the way we finally fulfill the Great Commission. Most Christians don't know that there are still places on earth that the gospel message has not reached. I mean, that's crazy. That in 2022, that there are still places people have never heard the name Jesus. So we have been given a great task that has not been completed yet. I do think that technology and the internet and, you know, being online and all of the things can be leveraged to complete that task. And I think our kids' generation can be the ones that do it. Yeah. So we want to make sure we cultivate that in their hearts as well. And I really believe that God could raise up some of the kids in our children's ministry to be adults one day that, you know, they're not just missionaries that go to live in other countries. They're missionaries through creating some type of online whatever that takes the gospel, you see what I'm saying? The gospel message to the ends of the earth. So we want to make sure that we're also, you know, planting those seeds so that our kids can dream a little bit and see how the technology could be involved, you know, in their dreaming for what, you know, God has in store for them for their futures.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, before we wrap up today, I wanted to talk a little bit about something that's coming up here at our church. We have the Better Together Women's Conference. It's happening March 11th. I'm really pumped about that, man. There's Morgan is putting together a really good team. There's going to be like a panel of women they're talking.
Yeah, so if you haven't signed up yet, ladies, you need to sign up.
Yeah.
It's not that far away. It's not this Friday night, but the following Friday night.
At 6:30. Yeah. That's when it starts.
So I know we've got over 100 women who have already registered so far.
Which is awesome.
It's going to be a great evening. It's going to be really good food, great panel, great discussion, great friendships. And ladies, you're going to leave encouraged.
Yeah.
So I would encourage you to sign up. And then, you know, hey, if you're a guy and you're listening right now, like tell your wife you need to go to that, you know, and you hold the fort down for the evening. And we're doing something for the men this spring. Yeah. Just so guys know we haven't forgotten about you as well. But yeah, this is all about the ladies. And I do think that all of us are better together. And I think women getting together with other women, they're going to leave super encouraged. So yeah, make sure if you haven't signed up, ladies, that you do that.
Where can they sign up for that?
VaughnForest.com.
VaughnForest.com. Well, that'll do it for today. Adam, thank you so much for jumping in and talking with us about this. I think this is a super important topic to hit. And I'm excited to see what people do with this content. So on the behalf of Adam and me, we'll catch you next week.